Hello, everybody. This is Joseph P. Farrell on Thursday, October 31st, 2013. Happy Halloween, everybody. And this is actually take two for news and views from the Nefarium. I actually recorded this on the wrong browser, and I sounded like one of the chipmunks from Alvin and the Chipmunks. So hopefully this will work. I just got done. The reason I'm late in getting news and views posted today is I just got done with a wonderful 2-hour conversation with former Assistant Secretary Catherine Austin Fitts on her website, Solari.com. It will be in the members area on Giza Death Star, I would imagine, within the next week. For those of you who are members of Solari.com, I imagine Catherine will get that put up there within the next couple days. I don't really know how her technical support fellow does that, but that's something to look forward to, and it has a little bit to do with what I want to talk about in tonight's news and views. I do want to make one other announcement before I get to that. Earlier today, the website passed 4 million hits, which has been since the new website rollout about 2.5 years ago. So I wanted to take the opportunity to thank everybody for your memberships, your prayers, your donations, all of you sending me articles. That's wonderful to see what you guys are watching and looking at. I want to just thank everybody for your support and your prayers and your donations. It's been a fun 2 years. All right, I want to get to something today that kind of fits into the wider context that Catherine Fitts and I were talking about earlier during my interview with her. And it's the whole idea of reserve currency status, the NSA, the spying that's been going on, particularly with the episode with Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel. And this article that I will be referencing both on the YouTube site and on the website, it's a fascinating article, and it's about why China does not want its currency, the yuan, to be a reserve currency or to have that status. They're pressing for something else, and we'll be talking about that in a minute. But at the beginning of the article, I'll hold that up there so that you can see it. There's a chart, and it comes under the heading Reserve Currency Status Does Not Last Forever, but it goes back 700 years to the countries that have had their currency function as kind of a modern-day reserve currency. And listen to these countries, because this is very, very significant. Portugal, Spain, the Netherlands, France, Britain, and the United States. Now, over those last 700 years, if there's one thing that each of these countries have in common, they have all been worldwide empires, all right? And in the case of Portugal and Spain, France and Britain, they have had significant colonial empires. In the case of the Netherlands, and to a lesser extent Britain and the United States, these empires have also been based on a string of military bases by which those countries have been able to project military force pretty much anywhere on the globe, and to do so quickly and sharply, all right? So in other words, that is a very Venetian model. For those of you who have been reading my latest book, Financial Vipers of Venice, you'll recognize that model as being very much the Venetian model of the way it sustained its empire. But the significant point here is there is an ineluctable link between reserve currency status and the rise of world empires. And I pointed that out in Financial Vipers of Venice too, because if you go back and look at the rise of international bullion brokers, at the time that coinage begins to rise, you see something else rising. You see slavery and the creation of huge global empires: Babylon, Assyria, Persia, ultimately Alexander the Great's Macedonian Empire, and then finally, of course, the Roman Empire. You have the creation with reserve currency status of what one of the authors that I consulted in Financial Vipers of Venice called the military coinage slavery complex, the ancient version of the modern empire with reserve currency status, which is backed up ultimately not by the trust in that currency, but rather by the military force that the currency represents. All right. Trust is a major factor, and that's what we're going to get to here in this article. This article points out, and it does so by citing a Chinese American economist. It begins by saying, quote, a switch to a totally different system, say a gold-backed yuan, would cause enormous disruption and chaos. China, which has been a long-term planner for thousands of years, doesn't want such a sudden change, unquote. And that's probably fairly true because, you know, the old adage, Americans think in terms of election cycles or decades. Europeans tend to think in terms of centuries. Chinese tend to think in terms of millennia. It's a part of the cultural outlook. And I think that's very true, that the Chinese are long-term planners in that sense. They don't want upheaval. It doesn't do them any good. Now, the economist that this article is citing is a fellow by the name of Michael Pettis, who is an American economist currently teaching at the University of Beijing in China. And he points out what reserve status does to the nation and its domestic economy, not its imperial economy, but its domestic one. He says, quote, when foreigners actively buy dollar assets, they force down the value of their currency against the U.S. dollar. U.S. manufacturers are thus penalized by the overvalued dollar and so must reduce production and fire American workers. The only way to prevent unemployment from rising, then, is for the United States to increase domestic demand, and with it domestic employment, by running up public or private debt. But of course, an increase in debt is the same as a reduction in savings. If a rise in foreign savings is passed on to the United States by foreign accumulation of dollar assets, in other words, U.S. savings must decline. There is no other possibility. In other words, he goes on to say that the badge of honor of reserve currency status, quote, comes at a real cost to the long-term growth of the domestic economy and its ability to manage debt levels. All right, and that's key right there, because remember something else. China's money is not monetized debt. That's another key component here. It's a system very different than what you have with the Western system of monetized debt in the hands of private central bankers. As such, the article points out, China is, quote, pushing for a basket of currencies to replace the dollar as reserve currency. Indeed, China, as well as Russia, the UN, and many other countries and agencies have called for the special drawing right to become the new reserve currency. It is a basket of 4 currencies currently: the US dollar, the euro, the British pound, and the Japanese yen. And it's administered by the International Monetary Fund. Now, note what China's really doing here. I've been pointing out that the BRICS nations are going to have to evolve similar institutions to the World Bank, the IMF, and to institutions like SWIFT for international clearing. The NSA spying scandal has recently, as you all are aware, provoked the BRICS nations into constructing their own independent internet. And the real reason, my friends, is to prevent the kind of financial spying that the NSA spying gives. It's to level the playing field, and I will predict that close upon the completion of that independent internet in the hands of the BRICS nations, you're going to see them create their own international clearing mechanism. That's the key. Now, why am I emphasizing all this? Because China wants the yuan to become part of this special drawing rights new kind of reserve basket currency, all right? Now, that's not a new idea. It was first proposed, as this article points out, back in the 1930s by John Maynard Keynes, who proposed a kind of basket currency, and here comes a catch, based on a basket of commodities, all right? Now, notice what he did. He just proposed a currency that has a backing of real value and is therefore not monetized debt. And the article goes on to point out that the mechanism for creating such a currency would be available because we already have mechanisms of international clearing for commodities. So China is trying to position itself into a role where it will have influence within that SDR. And notice also that there's only two nations that would have any say over the currency of their own nations. That's the United States and Great Britain. So in other words, it's going to be heavily tilted in favor of the BRICS nations. And who holds the swing vote with the euro? Angela Merkel in Germany. So I want you to put the NSA spying scandal and the outrage that Europeans are feeling not simply in terms of the spying itself. The Europeans aren't stupid, and their leaders aren't stupid. They know that we spy on them. They know that they spy on us. Everybody spies on everybody. But what's really going on here, I submit to you, is not so much that they're spying on. What's also been happening the last 2 weeks, if you've been following my blogs, is it's coming out more and more, largely being by way of revelations of Edward Snowden and Greenwald and so on, and it's being reported in Russia today that the NSA spying thing is really about economic warfare. It's really about finance, and it's about propping up the reserve status of the dollar and an unlevel playing field. So the United States, in other words, is going to track any financial moves of the most powerful economy in Europe, and that's, of course, Germany. And that's the outrage. So in other words, the Europeans are not going to back down from this because the real hidden implication of all this is financial. All right. Now let's look a little more closely. The euro is one of the currencies in the special drawing rights basket of currencies. And the euro is under pressure. Like it or not, either way it goes, if the European Union stays together, it will be Germany that is in the driver's seat. And if the European Union falls apart, it will be Germany that will probably be at the center of some sort of North European amalgamation, either with its own currency or with a Deutschmark kind of centered economy, and they will gravitate more and more toward the BRICS nations. Now recall in that regard that Europe has recently signed agreements with China to conduct their bilateral trade, completely bypassing the US dollar. So in other words, it's already lost its reserve status in European-Chinese trade, and they are trading directly in yuan. All right? That's going to increase. This is what's behind the move recently by the United States, sponsored by Zbigniew Brzezinski, to get a kind of GATT or North American Free Trade Agreement with Europe, to keep Europe firmly in the camp of the Anglo-American financial elite. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the NSA scandal is being used as a wedge, as a crisis of convenience, and perhaps a created one, to drive another wedge between Europe and North America. So something to watch, folks. The dollar's reserve status is under assault. Everybody knows that sooner or later it's got to end. What I think you really see happening here is that the American part of the financial elite is trying to buy time for that retrenchment scenario to complete itself so that they have some base of manufacturing and value production in this country when that occurs, to cause the least amount of financial instability. And that would also explain this massive push on the part of the United States to centralize the economy. Now, the final thought in that regard, and that kind of ties in for those of you who are members to listen to the interview with Catherine Austin Fitz. If they're under pressure to do all of this, and if the figures are running in the trillions and quadrillions of dollars, it's not showing up, so to speak, in the circuit. That means that there's a hidden factor involved, and that hidden factor may not even be on this planet. Watch for blogs coming up this week about more about asteroid defense and space collateralization, because I think that these things are implicated, and they in turn have their own implications that are rather profound, breathtaking, radical, high-octane speculation, to be sure. Anyway, that's it for Halloween, October 31st, 2013. News and views from the Nefarium. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Thank you for the support of the website. Bye-bye, and I'll see you on the flip side. God bless everybody.